Try some hair dye.
We are officially live, so thanks for sharing that. Let's on the topic of hair dye. There was a guy who cut my hair for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And at one point he's like, you should consider dyeing your hair. And I'm like, whatever. And he's like, but here's the issue. See, what the top of your head, it's thin, but it's blonde, and everything else is white. So it looks like you have the world's worst toupee.
That makes sense.
So he's like, it would make sense to.
In your case, that's a little different.
To do that. And I'm like, okay. Because to me, it's just whatever. I kind of enjoy the gray hair. You know, it is what it is. When it falls, when I get my hair cut, it's like white as snow, and I go. When did that happen? But I remember the first haircut when it did drop and it was white. I'm like, oh, I was probably like 39 or something like that.
Yeah. You grayed earlier. I have my brother and my cousin. Well, my cousin, for example, he was white, full white by 30, white. It's like, it just happens. It's not. People assume that means old, but it's not necessarily the case.
Oh no, my father-in-law he hardly has any gray hair. He's 70.
Yeah, my dad didn't have a whole lot, which is probably why I don't have a whole lot. I have a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is a podcast, and it's not about hair products. Welcome, by the way, to After Service, a production of Open Door Community Church. I'm Joe, and this is Pastor Brian.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, Joe. Thank you for rescuing us from that deep rabbit hole that means nothing.
Speaking of rabbit holes, I do want to just acknowledge that I want to affirm all of you people who are watching right now, despite the fact that Game 6 of the NBA Finals is occurring as we speak, and the Celtics versus the the Golden State Warriors. I assume you're for the Warriors.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it a Steph Curry thing?
Yeah, in general, yeah. But he also kind of characterizes the team. I like how they're a very selfless team. I like they're not jerks. A lot of them are. I mean, like there was a crowd in this playoffs that was chanting "F you, Draymond," a player on our team. It's like,
Draymond Green.
Really? Yeah. Really? It's a game. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, how did we get to this place?
Well,
I mean, I know, but
I'm for the Warriors, but I wouldn't be sad if the Celtics won. I hate the Celtics, by the way. Just I grew up, and even though I have an Irish background, you think it's Boston, it's Irish,
right?
You should love it. But the thing is there's one of the guys off the bench. His name's Peyton Pritchard.
Oh, he's from Oregon,
he's
Portland.
From West Lynn.
Oh, that's right. He's from West Lynn.
He's
even.
a West
that's
Lynn
right.
high school graduate, and so it's kind of, and he's got some good minutes. He's played a lot of good hustle ball. It's kind of fun, to watch that.
And I want him to succeed because it's West Lynn. Yeah.
Right. I mean, nobody succeeds coming out of West Lynn. The mean streets of West Lynn, yeah.
But there was Kevin Love as well. I think he may have been Lake Oswego though.
Yeah. No, there's plenty of good sports ball people coming out of West Lynn.
Thompson. Klay Thompson. I don't know if he was Lake Oswego or West Lynn, but he's a Portland guy too.
It's pretty cool. Anyway, we have distracted.
But there's not a lot.
Enough.
There's not a lot. Yeah. So, anyways, but enough of the sports stuff. We are here to talk about Ruth, aren't we?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a lovely book. And it's a lovely story. And as you mentioned several weeks ago, many people point to Ruth as like a perfectly told story, or an excellent, a fantastic example of storytelling. And I know, so many like young women in like youth group, and even, adult women point to that as a story that's really inspiring to them for various reasons. I'm always intrigued by stories that when you get to the end, here's the hook. Here's why this was important. You enjoyed it, and
here's the hook. Here's the real big deal.
Yeah.
And we have that obviously with Ruth. Yeah. And I liked, I think people see their lives through stories, and even if they don't consciously think about it that way, it's an easy thing to do, to go, I mean, I could see the beginning of my story, here's the middle, blah, blah. So you can kind of conceptualize and put yourself in the story, which is what people do with Ruth. And I talked about this, why Ruth, it's named after Ruth, even though she's not the main character, that it's Naomi, her mother-in-law, is actually the main character, which for a long time I thought that wasn't the case. I thought Ruth was what the story was about. I mean, don't we name stories after the main character? But not in this case. In this case, it's her. It's her mom. So I wanted to bring up that. I wanted to help us to see. I wanted to rescue it from sentimentalism this week. So many times it's easy to just dismiss Ruth's choice to stay with her mother. I mean, okay, for those who didn't watch, I mean, the basic story is her life is devastated in the first 5 verses, and then she decides to go back home from the foreign land, and her two daughters go with her, and one of them stays, and Ruth continues with her and continues on back into the promised land, and therefore we have the story of what happens with Ruth and Naomi. And a lot of times people want to say, well, Ruth just loved her mother-in-law more. Well, and I don't think that's at all the case. So I tried to show that in what I said. And then I also wanted to point out, so that's one thing we can talk about, the sentimentalization of stories. The other thing is I try to help people see, as you pointed out just a moment ago, the hook at the end, and why reading it later in the Old Testament rather than right after Judges helps emphasize that point of who is David. In fact, it heightens it even more, because it's not just that it's talking about the David that's her physical grandson, but it's the greater David that's coming, Jesus, which you understand that that's what that is only after you've read all the prophets. So
one, I'm going to just jump into one thing that really is striking to me from Sunday, and I think it's challenging for some people. You commented that, and I can't remember we had Naomi, Ruth, and I can't remember, Orpah. That Orpah didn't do anything wrong. Orpah did what was rational.
She did the rational thing. Yeah.
She did the rational thing. And where Ruth didn't. And the question is, was Ruth walking on some kind of faith there? Or was she drawn by the Spirit somehow to make that decision? And it's interesting. I think that it kind of illuminates to me two kind of, hello puppy, two kind of thoughts.
No.
Two kind of thoughts around Christianity, where you have like Bethel and some of these that are very driven by emotional and sentiment, right, and then you also have some very conservative, very almost devoid of emotional, very rational, and we can idolize those in different ways. And in the story of Ruth, I think we kind of generally are like, oh well, let's walk on faith. Let's go to the right. Let's go where Ruth went. And why be so black and white and rational like Orpah? And I think it's really easy to kind of, when you hear one story versus another, to sway, to vacillate there. And because I was struggling a bit as you were explaining it, because I was thinking about Dennis Corwin, our mutual friend. I was so jealous of Dennis. We talked about him last week, meeting in theater. When we were in our early 20s, I was so jealous of him because he was so structured. He was so disciplined. He did everything right. He saved his money. He bought a car, made payments.
His life was put together.
His life was very put together, and I was a hot mess, all over the place. And it's, in many ways, I tend to be more gut and emotional driven, and he is more rational and structured. And over the years, we've kind of merged, where he's recognizes that not everything can be planned, because if everything is planned for, then what do you do when the unplanned occurs? And not everything can be chaos, because you'll end up, working on a cruise ship for a couple of years.
Yeah. And so let me speak a little bit more to what I was thinking with that. Okay. So if we can make it contemporary. So you have two people. One is, and it's not totally black and white. It isn't black and white, but I think that the emphasis that is being made here is that Ruth is making a decision not based on emotions. And that's what I was trying not to say. It's not an emotional decision for her. It's the issue of, she has made a conclusion that the God of Israel is the true God, and she has changed her commitment from the gods of her people and the culture and the values of her culture of her birth to the people of God. And because of that, even if it means that I have to sacrifice peace and security and all these good things in life, it's worth it based on that principle of, but God's worth it. He's the real God. And I think, and that's why it's not about emotion. And sometimes I think what we when we pit the two together, it's like we want our cake and eat it too. We want to have the rational stuff. It's I don't know.
No, that's where I was struggling too, right?
I'm wondering if you have to, in a sense. I think there's times where you have to make a choice, because that's kind of what was happening there. Which are you going to pick? Are you going to pick a comfortable life, or are you going to pick following Jesus? Now, you don't always have to have that choice, but sometimes you do.
You know, it's the quandary of discernment, you know, to me, right? There are times when we need to lean into our faith and trusting that this is what God has intended for us, and also not relinquish our part in the play. That, you know, we need to be wise and make wise decisions. And I think Vanessa's, my wife's professional journey is a good example of that, where she tends to be very rational. Here's what I am supposed to do. I will follow these specific steps. And then God kind of kept going. That's not what I want you to do. Boom, knock you off course. Boom, knock you off course, until she leaned into that.
Yeah.
And when she started leaning into that, I mean, he still was nudging her, but it was so much less swimming upstream at that point.
Yeah. You know, I feel like there are times where people, okay, yeah, of course there are times where people do really stupid things and they do it in the name of God. And they say, I'm just walking by faith.
Sure.
Right, of course. But the other side of it is the reality. I think the clear testimony in Scripture is that God often calls you to do stuff that makes no sense. That says you need to just trust me to make this work out, even though rationally it shouldn't. This shouldn't be the right way to go. It's the you know, crossing the Jordan. You know, they need you to step into the stream before the stream parts. There's a dog walking across from in front of me. There's just so many of those cases where it's like it makes no sense, and yet we're called to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to mute me and get rid of this dog and let you talk first.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm not sure specifically what I'm going to talk about, but I have dogs as well. If I was going to, I'm not sure if you can hear me, Brian, but if I were kind of put myself into a camp, I would be a person that might, who has maybe historically, especially in my 20s, evaluated where my gut told me to go as where God wanted me to go. And,
okay.
You know, and that's where I was going into discernment, that, you know, that sometimes it's kind of hard to understand.
I'm wondering if it's not about, see, I don't think of it as a gut versus rational. It's a, what is the basis for unemotional choices that you're going to make? For her, it's like, I need to do this even though the road is hard, because I value following Jesus over the things my culture says I should value.
You know, I think that's maybe an easier way to parse it. That,
okay.
I mean, let's think about, it's this way's harder. And I also know that that's the right way.
Yeah.
You know, this is an easier way. It's not, it's the one that maybe practically makes more sense, but it's not necessarily aligned with following Christ. You know, I could do something that is borderline lacking integrity, but not, you know, but doesn't break any rules. Let's talk accounting.
Sure.
Like
yeah, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, here's something you can do. It's legal. There's nothing wrong with it in terms of common sense. It's going to save you all this money. And then you go, yeah, but that's not the integrity that I live by. It's why we evaluate like the laws within our country first by filtering it through our faith, right?
Yeah.
So even though something is legal doesn't mean that it's Christ-like.
Right. It's saying no to the culture. It's saying no to ease and comfort. If that is where, if it's clear that that's what God wants you to be doing, not based on a gut reaction, although not that hasn't, that can play into it too, of course. You know, I think about missionaries who give up their lives to go to another place to knowing that they're likely to get killed trying to do it. I mean, that makes no rational sense.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's like, but I'm living for something that I can only see by faith, the eternal. But then there's the just the day-to-day life that we live today. What are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to store up treasures in heaven? Are you going to are you going to choose to compromise, even if our culture approves of that and encourages you to do that? But maybe that's not what you're supposed to be doing, and you know you're not supposed to do that.
Well, I can't remember the verse, but in the New Testament where the man's got to go, bury somebody before he can follow Christ. Well, that's very practical, right?
Right.
And then Christ is saying, yeah, but I need you to follow me. There's a societal norm that says you go this direction. And then being a Christ follower means that you're going to be counter to societal norms a lot of the time.
All societal norms, meaning all societies, in every society, many of the norms. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
Yeah, not all norms in all societies, no. But in every society, even a Christian society, there's still going to be things in it that's like, that's not right.
Right, because we're human and we're flawed. Right. And our interpretation of God's will is imperfect. And I mean, I know plenty of, obviously I myself have issues, and there are good friends of mine who are Christ followers who occasionally will say something or do something, and I'll go, your interpretation of that is really interesting.
Which that's kind of what we're gonna talk a little bit about Sunday. Is the whole in what way is it authoritative? But that's for next week's discussion. So yeah, that's why I ended up just leaning on for her, it was an identity issue. And because of that identity of the Lord is my God, the people of God are my people, well, then I have to be where my people are. I need to be where my God is. I need to, that means I'm going to go where you go, Naomi, because it's your God and your people. Well, that's where I'm supposed to be, right? I'm supposed to die with them. Well, that's what I do. Rather, because she has rejected her culture of her family, which that's hard.
Oh yeah, yes.
Man, what a big choice that is. So
well, that's how you get labeled the black sheep of the family, right? Is that you turn away from what you recognize as not who you're supposed to be. That the home you grew up in, the family, the extended family that you are a part of is not really who you are. I mean, I think of somebody who's very close to us who has rejected some elements of their upbringing and has struggled with that, but this is who we are, but that's not who I want to be, and there's a pull to that,
Yeah.
In many ways, Vanessa, she's from Texas, but she's very not much of Texas.
Right.
And I'm not disparaging Texas, but
she's not very Texan. No. And by the way, that on a side note, that's kind of what I was meaning a little bit with, even in quote, very Christian cultures, like perhaps there's still parts of that culture that's not very Christian that you still have to reject. Yeah. Because there's some great parts about the Texan culture, and there's some that are not. There's some good things about Oregon culture, and there's some things that are not.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's where I think a big piece of grace comes in, that in many ways, I feel like if you are doing your utmost based on your understanding to follow Christ, that there's going to be some grace for you, well, I mean, I think what we've talked about before is like the only unforgivable sin is that you reject the Spirit, you reject Christ.
Right.
And that means there's a lot of grace in there, which makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
A lot of people uncomfortable with that. Yeah.
There's room to make mistakes. Of course, behind that is the intention to do the right thing based on your understanding and knowing you're going to screw up sometimes.
And I think, to kind of start to wrap it up is I really want to encourage people to really make their identity not in being an American, not in being a political party, not being, whatever your race is, whatever your ethnicity is, your core identity is that you're a follower of Jesus. There are other pieces of who you are, and those are wonderful, and God celebrates that and appreciate that stuff. But make your decisions based on that core identity of who you are in Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest lesson from this. And it is through her making that choice that all the blessings that ends up coming to Naomi come through that, because of that one choice that she cannot even, and at that moment, nobody sees this. Nobody sees it. Ruth doesn't see it. Naomi doesn't see it. The townspeople won't see it. Nobody sees it for a long time, and nobody really sees how significant it is till generations later and even in eternity later.
Yeah.
So just follow Jesus. Make that the core of who you are. So, all right. Next week, we're going to, like I said, Joe, we're going to be talking about in what ways is the Bible authoritative, and that's much more sticky wicket than you would think.
Oh no, I think it's plenty sticky wicket.
For some people, they're like, what? The Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. Yes, but what does that mean? That's what we're talking about on Sunday.
All right, good teaser. And it is 6:25 on Thursday. You've only missed 25 minutes of the game. Folks, now that you've watched the podcast, go enjoy some sports ball on TV, and I'll go buy the makings for nachos, and we will also enjoy the sports ball.
You guys have a great night. Hope to see you on Sunday. Take care.
Take care.